All right, welcome everyone. Let's make sure everybody makes it into our presentation today. Welcome to our presentation, and I'm going to introduce our presenters in just a second. This is sponsored by the Association of Adult Literacy Professional Developers, AALPD, and I'm going to tell you real quickly what AALPD is. We hope that all of you are members already, and if not, we'd love for you to join us. And if you'll go to the next slide, Destiny, I will just mention we have three main purposes. Community, we provide a community and network for PD practitioners. Professional development, we provide professional development for professional development practitioners. And standards, we set standards for PD and adult education based on research in the field. So with that quick overview and an invitation to join us if you're not already a member, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters today, Destiny Simpson and David Rosen. So thank you very much for sharing with us today.
Thank you, Sarah. And next slide. Destiny, are you there? Here we go. So this is the title of our presentation today. We're going to be talking, as you know, about Hyflex, and we will at a couple of points focus on Hyflex, particularly as it might be used for professional development. Many of you, maybe all of you, are professional development practitioners. And so we want to make sure not only that you know what Hyflex is, but beyond that, how it might be applied, particularly for professional development. Next slide, please. So this is who we are and what we our organizations are. Next slide. This is a book that Destiny and I and Jen Vadik, who you may also know, wrote a couple, 4 years ago, I believe, at this point. And in this book, which we will basically be introducing you to through our slides, is a lot of detail about what Hyflex is, how it's implemented, how people in our field have actually used it. And as you'll see if you take a look at it, in the appendix, there are interviews with people who use the Hyflex model in our field. And there are also I believe five videos of teachers with very helpful video information. Next slide, please.
So I can talk about this a little bit. The guide that David and I and Dr. Jen Vanek co-authored was one of the products that was developed through the IDEAL Consortium. The IDEAL Consortium is managed by World Education, and it's an opportunity for states to be able to join a group of other member states who really spend time focusing on digital and distance education. And so this map shows states that are currently members. But if you're not members of the state, throughout our session today, we'll talk about resources that are available to anyone. But if you'd like some more information about the IDEAL Consortium, I'll put a link in the chat. And I'll turn it back over to you.
Okay, thanks, Destiny. Actually, this one you might want to comment on.
So we also have a Padlet too that we'll be sharing a lot of different resources today. So this Padlet has some of the resources, we'll be talking about today, as well as other resources that you'll have a chance to look into. Some of them are focused on training and professional development. Some of them are developed for if you're actually offering Hyflex. And so we hope this will be a resource for you. But we'll be referring to this throughout the session. I'll be putting links in the chat, but please know that the links will be on the Padlet as well, too.
Great. Thanks, Dustin. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to introduce you to Hyflex. We're going to talk about what we think are its benefits or potential benefits. We'll have some resources for you. We'll have some examples of professional development models. And finally, we'll open it up for questions and discussion. Next slide. So what is Hyflex? It stands for hybrid and flexible, and it's really both. It's a hybrid model, but it really emphasizes flexibility. Well, flexibility for teachers? No, not so much. It's flexibility for adult learners. It was created actually by Brian Beatty at San Francisco State University almost 2 decades ago, and has been used in higher education for, well, 2 decades. In our field, it really wasn't used until the pandemic for obvious reasons. The pandemic provided challenges that could not be met by purely in-person instruction, and the Hyflex model really got a tremendous boost at that time. And many programs that were introduced to it then have been using it ever since. It features, and this is something you might or might not be aware of, it has 3 modes: the standard in-person that we've been using forever, and a synchronous model, which includes both the in-person class and people who are joining that class, but they're joining it remotely, and a purely online mode, which is entirely asynchronous. So as I mentioned, we really got started on this in 2020, and our field has been using Hyflex ever since. Next. When Beatty developed this with his graduate students at San Francisco State, he identified 4 underlying values. And these are the 4 values, and I'm going to cover each one of them in just a second, beginning with learner choice. So this is really, from my point of view, this is one of the most important of those underlying values. And the idea is that it enables the learner to choose how they want to participate. Let's say, for example, a learner really wants to attend class in person every day, but that's not possible. Then they can attend one day in person, the next day that it's just not possible to attend class. They got a sick child at home, or they're not feeling well, or for whatever reason, but they still want to join the class, and they can do that in the same time frame. They can do that as a part of a synchronous model. And then the third model is that they can't do either of those, or they don't want to do either of those. They can actually join the class and do it entirely asynchronously remotely. And they can switch at any point, ideally daily. That isn't always the case. In some cases, community colleges are a good example of this. There have to be a minimum number of people enrolled in the in-person component for that class to run. So it's not possible to have that kind of flexibility. Next one. Equivalency. And this is a tall order, but it's one well worth considering. And that is that it doesn't matter which mode somebody joins in, they will have the same opportunity to attain the same learning outcomes. Now, it might be different in each mode. There might be different affordances within that mode, but the goal is that it doesn't matter which mode they join in. Now, I'm not going to tell you that that's always practice. It's a tough but important value, one certainly to try to achieve. Next one. These are some examples, for example, of the equivalency. Somebody might, for example, be doing this in person, and within the class, the in-person class, they might join a small group discussion, and then together they might complete a Google document as a group, and that might be on a screen in front of them. It might be on their individual iPads or Chromebooks or desktop computers, whatever they might have. Um, then there's also the synchronous possibility. While they're doing that in person, the people who have joined the class that day remotely can participate in a Zoom breakout room, and they can, as a group, also join the same Google document, and they can, or a different Google document, and they can do the same task, but they do it remotely. And then the third one, and you might say, well, how would this work if it's entirely asynchronously? They could participate in a discussion board on their class learning management system. And they could complete a Google Doc individually. Next slide, please. So reusability, and this one really requires some understanding. The word artifacts is a puzzle to many teachers, and it simply means whatever it is that you do to help learners learn, whatever tools. It might be, for example, a document, it might be a video, it might be an audio file of some kind. It might be an image. It might be a series of images. It might be a cartoon, whatever it is that you use to help the students learn as an artifact. And the idea here is that whatever you develop could be used in all three modes. So it's reusable in the three modes, but it also has a different sense, which is it's reusable by another class that you might teach. You might develop it for one class and find, wow, that really worked well. I want to use it with my other class. Or it could be you share it with a colleague and that colleague uses it in her classes. So in other words, think of whatever you develop as having potential to be reused. Next value, please. Oh, we'll give the reusability example. This is just one possibility for reuse. Okay, so I'm a learner and I attend, let's say, synchronously. And I participate and fully in the class, but there were certain parts that I really want to go over. So there's a class recording that's provided to me and to all the rest of the learners. And I go back and I look at that part and I get an opportunity to reuse that to deepen my own understanding. Or maybe I wasn't able to go to class that day in person or online, but I watched the class recording asynchronously, and I'm able to gain whatever it is I needed for that particular class. Next slide. Accessibility, this really is focused on adult learners' ability to use the technology. In Hyflex and in all hybrid, really, there are lots of tools that people need to be able to use. Their learning management system, logging in or logging into multiple sites with different passwords. There are all kinds of skills that learners need to have. And so it's important to acknowledge that. And in some cases, that's really delivered before actually joining a Hyflex class so that the learners have those skills already. In other cases, that's not possible or desirable. And so the learners are really learning those skills as they're introduced to each new piece of technology in the class. So again, all three modes ideally lead to equivalent learning outcomes. Next slide. So let's talk about what the possible benefits. Maybe you've been thinking about Hyflex, but haven't really used it. What might be the benefits to you as a professional developer and really in particular to the teachers that you're working with? So the big one, as far as I'm concerned, is the very strong possibility of significantly increased learner attendance, retention, ability to complete the course, their ability to participate in post and willingness to participate in post-testing. And finally, most important of all, learning gains. What is it that they actually derive from participating in this model? And notice I said strong possibility, or we said strong possibility. There's not a lot of research in our field about this. We'll show you some that CASAS did a couple of years ago, I think. But there's not, as far as I know, there isn't any other specifically focused on our field. There is some research, particularly in higher education. Next slide. So I mentioned the CASAS research. This was provided to us by Kay Hartley at CASAS. And so the question that they raised and got some answers to was, does the Hyflex instructional model result in measurable continuity of participation and improvements in student learning gains? And there were 4 adult schools in California. These are the 4 schools. And they carefully tracked the outcomes from those schools. Next slide. I don't know if you can see that. You may need to enlarge your screen. But basically, what this shows us is that Hyflex worked. Um, the outcomes in this for the first year, all of the Hyflex classes in the study exceeded the California NRS goals, all of them. Next slide. In the second year, they exceeded the California NRS goals, with several classes showing even higher learning gains. So this is important. If you're just starting using a Hyflex model, you may not get the outcomes that you want in the first year, partly because it can be complex to implement and definitely requires professional development. Almost impossible to do this without a serious professional development program. So let's talk specifically, what about using Hyflex for professional development? And we're fortunate to have a guest joining us who can tell us a little bit about that.
We'll actually have Jeanette talk just a little bit later in the
Oh,
presentation.
okay. That's fine.
But I wonder, for participants that are joining us, it sounds like some of you are from working at programs, some of you work to support adult educators at programs. But what are some reasons or benefits you might see that Hyflex is a good option to offer for learners, either adult learners who are participating in adult ed services or offering it for professional development? And feel free to unmute or you can type in the chat.
One of the benefits that we found at Northern Essex Community College in Lawrence, Massachusetts, was just the overlapping or teaching the digital skills that the adult learners needed to have or need to have. In the past, we've focused primarily on building their English language learner skills in speaking, listening, reading, and writing. But Hyflex added a new dimension of focusing on, basic digital skills. So that was a benefit.
And Mary, I'm glad you pointed that out, because one of the things that for some programs, when they first think about Hyflex, they think about those digital literacy skills for learners that they know are going to be doing the online synchronous part or the online asynchronous. But what we found and heard from programs is that it's really important to teach all learners those digital literacy skills, as we know, because our adult learners need them for post-secondary ed, workplace, and family responsibilities, but also because you never know when someone in person might need to join online. Like, yeah, I normally come every day, but suddenly I have a sick child. I still am able to participate in class, but I can't really get to class today like I normally would. And so we've definitely heard from programs about how those digital literacy skills are important for all the learners, regardless of the mode. Thanks for sharing that.
I want to call your attention to Jeanette Chandler's comment. It definitely helps with the current climate, particularly in helping students stay safe while pursuing education.
And David had mentioned earlier about how Hyflex came more popular in during COVID, but many of you mentioned that barriers exist for our learners, and those barriers, didn't go away whenever the pandemic ended. There's still work schedules, family responsibilities, transportation challenges, and many other reasons that might make learners not comfortable coming to class. And so Hyflex is becoming, we kind of saw, I think, David, that increase during COVID, and then there were still programs that continued offering it, but we're seeing more and more programs being interested in offering it now as well, because we know that flexibility is what allows our learners to participate and persist. So we wanted to take some time. Thank you, David, for explaining so well what Hyflex is and giving us a great overview of it. We wanted to take some time to talk a little bit about some resources that are available to either support you directly if you're offering Hyflex, or if you are thinking about offering Hyflex, or if you're in a position where you're supporting adult educators and programs who are thinking about offering Hyflex. As we go along, we want to make sure we have time for some discussion. I recognize some names in here, and so I know some of you have experience with Hyflex, and so we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to share your experiences or your questions. But please feel free to type them also in the chat. David and I will be monitoring that as well, and we'll do our best to answer those either throughout the presentation or once we get to the discussion part of the session. But World Education has a couple of different resources available to support Hyflex. The nice thing about these resources, well, Dr. Beatty's book is one of the kind of to-go resources in terms of Hyflex. It's really focused on in higher education. What World Education did through the Ideal Consortium is we realized that this was a model that adult education programs were using, but it's also a model, though, that people need support to do. We're going to talk about some of the resources we have and then go a little bit more in depth about different ways that states or programs have supported their adult educators with adopting a Hyflex program. So we do have the guide, which David mentioned, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. We developed a Hyflex video series playlist, which is great for people that are new to Hyflex. And then we also have, and this is new for probably most of you in the on our webinar today, but a Hyflex crash course. And so we'll tell you a little bit more what that looks like. The Hyflex guide, as David mentioned, is a resource that was developed by interviewing adult educators across the country who were doing Hyflex. And so it's based on their experiences and as well as Dr. Beatty's work. We interviewed 17 different teachers and programs across the country. They were working with different levels of learners, different types of learners. There were different types of organizations, higher education, community colleges, as well as community-based organizations. And we really tried hard throughout the guide to make sure we included examples and vignettes and stories of how people are using Hyflex in the field. And so the guide is divided into these sections. One of the things you'll notice with these sections is that we try to make each section, when you go to it, digestible, so that it's something that somebody could sit down, probably in one setting, and read one of these sections of the guide. We try to include a lot of links and resources and examples for people to use, and it's available to read online, but you could also save it as a PDF, or if someone prefers, they could print it out and look at it that way. But we do have chapters on program planning, instructional planning, the actual teaching of in a Hyflex class, how to do a pilot and scale up, how to evaluation, and then also the technology that you use. One of the things that we included, though, which might be especially helpful for those of you that are new to Hyflex, are these vignettes, and they feature 10 different examples of how programs are offering Hyflex at their programs. One of the things you may have noticed in the chat, Mark and I were chatting back and forth about, well, what does Hyflex look like? What about this asynchronous model? What does that look like? One of the things you'll notice as you read through these vignettes is that each one of these programs kind of has a different way of how they implemented Hyflex at their program. And so each section has a description of the program and learners, what Hyflex looks like at their program, what technology they use, and what lessons they felt that they've learned from it. So these are great for a great way to kind of explore how could Hyflex look in my program? What might it look like? What might we want to make sure we do? What might we want to make sure we plan for? And so you can be as best prepared as possible as you're working on this. The next resource I want to show you is the Hyflex videos. And I'm actually going to go back to my browser for this. We have a playlist of videos that are available on YouTube for anyone to watch. They are, and I'm going to open this up on my browser here. They're available for, oh, 1 second, I'm sorry. Hold on. There was a link change in this, so we'll have to change that for on our Padlet. But there was there's 5 videos. 2 of them feature what Hyflex technology looks like in people's classrooms. And then the second group of videos show teaching strategies for what Hyflex actually looks like. So this is a teacher, Vi Haas, who's in Arizona, who filmed herself during the pandemic offering Hyflex. And so this is a great video to kind of show teachers that might be kind of wondering, well, how does Hyflex even work? What does the teacher do? What does the learner do? This video is a great example of one way that a teacher is offering Hyflex to her learners. She showed us the setup of what her Hyflex classroom looks like every day. And then she showed us a short clip of how she used Poll Everywhere to do online assessment with learners in both the in-person and the online learners. In addition to that, especially with Hyflex, one of the things I think, David, you've heard a lot of, as well as we've come across, is that a lot of times people's first reactions go like, what technology do I need? And so we made 2 videos to show just examples of technology that people use. These aren't technologies that we're endorsing in any way, but it helps give you a sense of the type of technology that's being used and how it might work in your classroom.
Destiny, let me just add a common question that I get is, how much does it cost, the technology? And the answer is not very satisfying. The range is probably $1,000, maybe $1,200 to 25 or $30,000. And interestingly enough, some of the community colleges, for example, that have budgets to create Hyflex rooms, have actually found that the high-level technology is much easier for teachers to use. In fact, one teacher said, "What technology? I just walk into the room, press the button, and everything's working." That's not the case in some of the lower budget technology, but it's still possible. In fact, it's very doable, I would say, at least for $2,000 with inflation, of course.
Thanks, David. This is a newer resource that's available to everyone. It was developed for the Ideal Consortium members, but it's currently available to anyone online. World Education developed a Hyflex crash course. This course is designed to take a user about 30 minutes. It's a very basic introduction to Hyflex. You might recognize some of the slides that we used today also covered same topics in here, but it really just covers what is Hyflex at a very high level, what are the benefits, and what to think about with program planning. We have some activities where people could then apply the information depending on what their level is. And these crash courses are available for anyone online through the World Ed learning management system. So I wanted to show you some of the other crash courses that are available. And then I'll put a link in the chat for these. But in addition to the Hyflex one, we also have Intro to Distance and Digital Education, Open Educational Resources, Distance Education Facilitation, Teaching with Gen AI, and Educational Technology. So each one of these crash courses is about 30 minutes. At the end, participants would get a digital badge for completing it. And it's a great way to really take to kind of dip your toes into learning more about this topic, whether it's Hyflex or another, and get some basic overview, introduction, as well as some additional resources and possible next steps you might take based on what you've learned so far. So we wanted to talk, because this is a group of professional developers, we wanted to talk a little bit about different PD models that programs or sometimes states have used uh, to implement Hyflex to help prepare their programs or their staff to offer a Hyflex classroom. So the first resource is the IDEAL Consortium. We are a group of states across the country that focus on digital and distance education throughout the year. And so we have a summer institute that's available for IDEAL member states. In addition to that, we also have learning circles and that are happening and starting right now. We have in addition to that, we also have resources that are available and also ed tech strategy session webinars. And so the IDEAL Consortium, if you're in one of these red states, it's a great way. You might want to reach out to someone in your state office or in your professional development programs to learn more about that. If you're not in one of those states, there's still some resources and models that are available to you. All of the 3 resources I just talked about are available to anyone. But for those that are in an IDEAL member state that are at the PD level, we do have the IDEAL 102 study circles. And so I know some of you have participated in them already, but these are a great way to allow teachers to explore Hyflex and what they're doing with Hyflex with fellow Hyflex teachers. So I was able to pilot this. Elizabeth, who's on the webinar, participated in it. And it was really great because there were teachers from across the country in the pilot who were offering Hyflex and could offer different suggestions of things that they use, different tools, resources, and challenges. They created an action plan and then they implemented this. So if you're not from an IDEAL member state, feel free to reach out to me and we could talk about like, well, how could we offer something like this for your program, for your state? And we'd be happy to explore that further. You could also create this yourself using the Hyflex guide and the videos, because that's a free resource available to anyone. And, developing a space and time for Hyflex teachers to get together to talk about challenges and resources. But in addition to that, Jeanette, who is a member of, is from New Hampshire and a member of the IDEAL Consortium, she's here to tell you a little bit more about how they use Hyflex to deliver professional development in New Hampshire. So Jeanette, I'm going to turn it over to you now.
Sure. Thank you, Destiny and David, for inviting us here with you today. I loved listening to everything you both had to share, and I can't help but agree with everything that you've said. I was nodding through most everything of what you've said. We've experienced almost all of the learner benefits that you had to share. The students, it is when I went to our teachers who use Hyflex, I'm just going to share briefly at first, I wanted their input in terms of what are the benefits that they see for their students. They mentioned right away some of what you brought forth. Is ideal for student schedules, definitely for childcare, last minute childcare needs, and for work schedules, better attendance overall. They're able to capture more students. And as you pointed out, David, what I had put in New Hampshire, We've had a couple issues with ice in some of our parking lots, and we haven't had any issues. They were looking for certain people, but it was scary. And so having the opportunity for Hyflex without students being worried about attendance or being penalized for deciding to show up online instead of in person is a fabulous feature for our students, the students that we serve. And we love offering that for our students. We have been offering Hyflex opportunities since just before the pandemic, actually, and that is because of the Ideal Consortium being a member state. So that part has been fabulous. And the teacher, in terms of teacher benefits, they love being able to reach more students. It is a front heavy load, as David intimated, but once you get going with Hyflex, there is no stopping the teachers or the students. Having the freedom to show up online, in person, go back and forth depending on the needs. It just, there's a freedom that they just didn't have before. And it is amazing for the students. And I was talking to teachers. We have teachers at intermediate and advanced level who they offer links for students who are online, and that's how they share sometimes a lot of their artifacts, and the students will capture those. And then for our lower level, our literacy level students, a different set of teachers who offer Hyflex. It's amazing. I love our teachers who work with our students at the level that they are ready to work at. They use WhatsApp to share documents. Let's see. I know I'm going fast, but that's because I'm excited to talk about how Hyflex works, at least here in New Hampshire. It looks different in each of our classrooms because the teachers work with the needs of the students. Something else that I've also come to learn, that one of our programs in Dover, actually, every new class, they start the students purposely. They divide the students half and half. So to help all of our students be successful with the Hyflex model, they separate the students. They ask half the students to go elsewhere in the building, any place they choose, so that they can access the materials in an online format. They're in the building, so if they need help, they can easily come back to the classroom, but it's a low stakes environment, so they can experience what it's like to have that low stakes distance learning. And then they'll, after fashion or halfway through the class period, they'll switch it up. They ask the students to come back to the class, and then the other students will go out until everyone is familiar. And then once everyone is familiar with the online experience, then they can come and go as they please. And that is one great tip from some of the teachers who do offer Hyflex. Make sure that you have the right technology. Destiny and David mentioned that, in place for everyone. You want your teachers as well as your students to be successful. Another thing that came up that I thought was really fabulous was watch or participate in a Hyflex class before attempting to do it yourself. It's just a suggestion or a tip, but it will bring up a lot of questions for yourself to help you set yourself up for success. And then for administrators, for professional development for administrators, start with a teacher who is willing and able, that wants to try Hyflex, who is tech savvy. It'll be so much easier What starting with that sort of teacher who is willing and able. And then also, if there is a remote possibility for volunteer teachers or even volunteer students to help others, it will set everyone up for success. These are just tips that we've learned over the years that have helped our teachers and our students be successful with Hyflex. Mary, how do you roll out PD for Hyflex with your instructors or incentives? We actually, our upcoming conference in April, we have a workshop on Hyflex, and the same thing that is done with our students, we are doing with our teachers. We're splitting them up, all of our teachers, and we're going to have them participate as if they're students, and we're sending them off into other areas for that low stakes experience. They need to experience what our students are going to experience.
Jeanette, I know that at least at one point, the state director of adult education in New Hampshire was offering all required PD for administrators and able to do that because it was offered in Hyflex so that they could choose any mode.
Yes. Yes, that is true as well. That is true.
So, one of the things that you can be thinking about if you're a professional developer that's offering support for programs is not only how can you support them with offering Hyflex, but are there opportunities where it might make sense to offer a Hyflex option for some professional development that you're offering? I'm guessing, Jeanette, sometimes the winter weather could be a factor where, like, yeah, or distance to travel to a site. Maybe you have a concentration of people who are interested in this topic and can attend in person, but there's some other people in a different part of your state that are also interested, but it doesn't fiscally make sense for them to drive to the same location. Hyflex is a great way to offer PD as well, too.
Yes, absolutely. In fact, over the years, I think most of us have gravitated to more online than in person. Financially, it has saved the state so much money to do so. Although we miss seeing each other in person as well. Once we dig out from the beautiful white landscape we have, we'll get back in person. But yes, we love that flexibility of connecting online. We have that freedom. You're absolutely right.
Thanks so much, Jeanette, for sharing what's happening in New Hampshire with Hyflex. I know there's some other states that are also supporting teachers with offering Hyflex, and so please feel free to share in the chat if you'd like to, or we're going to open it up for discussion as well too. But before we do that, we just want to share a couple of other models that either you, if you're at a program, or if you're a professional developer, could use. Many programs use professional learning communities. Sometimes they're across the state, sometimes they're at a specific program, but using the free resources like the guide, the YouTube playlist, the crash course, and work on it together as a learning community, share, discuss, plan, and implement together. We've also had program-wide approach. So I've worked with Sweetwater Adult School. They're a school, just adult school in California, in San Diego. And so it was a partnership between World Education and OTAN, and we did monthly webinars with their teachers. The teachers had paid PD time, which was really an important support that helped them participate. In addition to that, teachers that agreed to try Hyflex are provided with extra planning time. And so that's one of the things that David, Jen, and I found that all the programs either offered to start off with or said that they needed to make sure that teachers, especially when they're first getting started with Hyflex, have extra planning time to plan those lessons. Because at first, whenever you're doing lessons with 2 or possibly 3 groups of different learning modes, it takes a little bit to get used to planning that way. What I've heard from many Hyflex teachers is though, as they become more experienced, it became faster for them. It wasn't quite the heavy lift that it was when they first started, but when they first started, they definitely needed extra planning time, and it's something that programs have continued to offer as whenever possible for teachers that are doing Hyflex. So you could take a program-wide approach. In addition to that, in Washington, D.C. last program year, I worked with OSSI, which is like their state office, and they partnered with the University of District of Columbia, World Education, and Mustard Seed Learning, and they combined action research with piloting Hyflex in an IET classrooms. And so it was really interesting to see how a welding program could do Hyflex for their IET program. Now, there were sometimes people just had to come in and actually hold the welding gun, but there were other times then there were topics or there were sections of the course where they could be offered in a Hyflex mode. And so they found that persistence increased with that. They had learning outcomes that were just as good or if not better than learners that only did, in-person learning. And so there were some really promising data that came from that pilot that they did. But at this point, I think we want to turn it over to you all to kind of hear a little bit more about what's uh, what it looks like and how you've been supporting teachers in Hyflex. So, David, I thought maybe we'd jump to this question because of where we're at with time.
Okay,
And
sure.
start with this one, and then we can maybe work our way back depending on how time goes.
So these are tips that we have learned, and we're wondering what tips you have for supporting teachers, administrators, and others who have started or who are thinking about starting Hyflex. And you can unmute yourself or you can answer in the chat.
So this is Mary Eileen McDonnell again. So our Center for Adult Learning uh, rolled out a pilot of Hyflex. And I think the tip we gleaned from the first go around or just starting was to start very small. So our pilot team consisted of only 3 teachers who agreed to try it out. And there were lots of things that we didn't expect. Like for instance, we had the college had purchased OWL. It's a tech thing, like from OWL Labs. It's this physical tech tool that enables people in person to collaborate and during a lesson. And it was oh, thank you so much for bringing that up. That's great. So
it looks like an owl. That's right.
Yes. One of the obstacles we faced in our rolling out the pilot was that we were waiting on the tech team to install the OWL. And then there was a little bit of training involved in setting up the OWL. And that, of course, set us back in trying to roll out the Hyflex pilot. But, so I guess the tips were, just jump right in, know that there's going to be a lot of things that need ironing out, but give it a go, because there's so many benefits for our students.
Yeah, great. Yeah, the OWL is pretty widely used, particularly for programs that don't have a big budget. It's not expensive. one thing that people have learned is that if you have a large classroom with a high ceiling, you may need 2 owls. And they don't necessarily tell you that. I don't know why OWL doesn't mention that, but that is a solution that many have found very workable. We have a comment from Marilyn Anderson. She said, we continue to support teachers with engagement around Hyflex. As we heard over and over, that was the biggest challenge. And I'm wondering, Marilyn, if you meant engagement by the online learners. Was that what you were referring to?
Yeah, Destiny's pulling up one of our resources we created. Yeah, like over and over again, we hear from teachers how difficult it is to engage learners when they're in two different locations, particularly. So, in addition to like the semantics and technology, which I know teachers get really nervous about, really the biggest issue though is how do we get those students engaging in the same way if they're all in person, they would be engaging. And so we provided this resource here with Destiny, which is a choice board where they can kind of look and get more resources in some ways to kind of work on engagement. And then and we tried to make it kind of engaging in itself by making it a choice board. And then we also linked them to a lot of Destiny and World Ed's resources because you guys have some great stuff. And then we did develop two, we called it engagement in Hyflex and virtual classrooms because a lot of the challenges with the engagement are similar to challenges we have in all virtual classrooms as well. I call it like the black box syndrome, where students have their cameras off and you don't really know all the ways if they're engaging or not. And so we created an on-demand course for teachers to basically kind of plan how they're going to support those engagement pieces, and with a lot of resources in that course as well. So those are just some things we do in Arizona. Now, we don't do a lot of trainings in a Hyflex modality, but we do offer a lot of resources for teachers because we have quite a few teachers in our state or programs in our state that utilize that modality.
Thanks, Marilyn. This reminds me that one of the things that Destiny and Jen and I learned when we were putting together the guide, and it was from an Arizona teacher who was dealing with this issue of how do you keep the online learners engaged? And she said, preference them. Our habit is to, be able to engage people in the classroom. So you need to set first the policy of engaging your online learners, and the people in the classroom will not will not suffer from that decision.
I also think, and I know you mentioned it too. I think if there's ways you can give your online learners your in-person learners technology as well, so they can engage with them, that's usually, I think, teachers find the most success because then you can provide resources still in a digital space, even though the student's in person and they all can interact. So, but I know not all programs have the ability to provide devices for in-person learners, but it can be really helpful.
Thanks, Marilyn.
I just want to jump in really quick to remind all of us ourselves that it's also important that we remind ourselves and our students to give us all some grace with this. We're learning together. And things may not go perfectly, but we're going to learn from what happens. And I think it helps our students see that things go wrong and they're forever watching us. How do we handle when something goes wrong as instructors? I think it's super important for them to see how we struggle through challenges and overcome them and engage our students as co-experts, to use the expertise that's in the room or online. Have a plan, a backup plan.
Yeah, Jeanette, I'm glad you brought that up. The one of our teachers that we featured in the video when she talks about her daily technology setup, she says eventually she just trains her students to do it so that they take responsibility for setting up, because you might be able to see here, she doesn't use like an owl camera, but like setting up the speakers that she uses in the classroom, setting up the camera and helping maybe get other people's technology set up. So it helps empower the learners, it helps teach their digital literacy skills, and it helps teach that shared collaboration. And yeah, we're all learners in this. And so I think it's great that you reminded us the importance of not only for teachers to remember that, but also for us to remind our learners about it too, because most likely they've never participated in a learning format like this. Elizabeth shared two links in the chat of videos of programs in Minnesota who are doing Hyflex. I'm not sure, Elizabeth, if there's anything else you'd want to add related to this or
Oh, yeah,
talk.
it's the same program. That podcast is just an interview with the manager and kind of their lead technology teacher. And the other one is a presentation they did in January, where you get to hear from some of the teachers and see some of the activities and resources that they use. Um, a really slick and like, why didn't I think of this trick is you can see they've set their slides to be vertical because so many learners don't have a computer and they are joining class online on their phones and they don't always know to turn the phone sideways, or that doesn't always work depending on what settings you have. So this is just an easy way to make it a little more accessible for learners on phones.
Great tip.
I wanted to share another resource on the Padlet that we is helpful if you're either doing Hyflex or providing professional development. In Pennsylvania, teachers aren't required to be certified teachers. They need to have a 4-year degree. And so some people like me, I came to adult ed with not a background in education. This chart down here has a bunch of different learning activities that you could offer. But one of the great things about it is that they have these examples broken out with a description of what it is. So it's great for brand new teachers who are looking for ways to offer interactive and engaging learning activities. But when we think about Hyflex, the next thing it does is it provides descriptions of how to do it. But then how would you do this for the in-person learners? How would you do it for the online synchronous learners? And how could this work for your online asynchronous learners? So there's all these different learning activities that are available, but broken down in a way that you could see how would you do this in a Hyflex classroom. So it helps the teachers not have to not only think about what do I want to do, but how do I do it in Hyflex. It helps them kind of fill in both of those things as their lesson planning. So. Let's see here.
Destiny, I'm suggesting that we put our emails in the chat for people because
That
we're
sounds
nearing
great.
the end of our time here.
Thank you. And so we'd love to hear from you more if you have any questions. There's just a couple of update slides that Sarah's going to walk you through, but we really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all and to hear what's happening in your area with Hyflex, as well as share some resources available to you.
So, oops, let me just say, David, were you going to say something? I feel like maybe I cut you off.
You're probably going to say it. Go ahead.
Well, let me just, first of all, please join me in thanking David and Destiny for sharing their expertise and those fantastic resources. So yes, thank you very much for coming today. Then we just have a couple of quick announcements. So the first one is about the AALPD discussion group, which David moderates and does a fantastic job. I just put in the chat how to join that group. Do you want to say anything about it, David? Is that...
Please join. We've had some really exciting discussions, nuts and bolts and visionary discussions. And you have access to all the ones that have taken place and are continuing, and you can add your own questions and challenges and aha moments as you like. Contact me and I'll sign you up.
There you go. All right, and a couple of things that are coming up on March 26th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. We'll have supporting numeracy, professional development, and that we are partnering with the ANN, the Adult Numeracy Network. Connie Rivera and Heidi Schuler will be our presenters, and they're going to follow it up, because what's better than one presentation is two presentations, I think was their thought. So they're going to come back in April on the 30th and do strategies for developing new and emerging math instructors. So those are two things that are coming up. Also, if you're going to COA, please join us for the pre-conference, Pit Crew PD, Powering Up Learning Communities and Communities of Practices. We will also have an AALPD meet and greet on the Tuesday morning of COA. So look for more information. For those of you that are members, it'll come out in an email. If you're not a member, we'd love for you to join us. It is free to join AALPD. And that leads us to the last link I'm going to share with you. The idea for this presentation today came from a suggestion in our survey from our members saying, what would you like to see? So if you have not yet filled out this survey, we'd love for you to do that. Also, you can just send a quick email, and I will put my email in the chat as well. If you have a suggestion, just let us know. Or if you have a topic that you think that you would like to share as a presenter, that would be awesome. And that brings us to our time. So I will say thank you again to our presenters and to all of you who are working out there across the country. Thank you for all that you do.
And Sarah, I would just add there'll be a link to this on the website soon, and the slides
Yes.
too. I can send you the slides if you don't have them.
Yep.
Okay.
So yes, as is our practice, we will post the recording in a few days and the slides. So thank you. And then they gave some great resources, so those will be available for you. All right. Thank you, everyone. See you next month.
Thanks. Bye-bye.